Messengers of Deception, UFO Contacts, and Cults by Jacques Vallée. Sorry for sucking at it, but I'm doing the best I can, and I struggle. So, but I need to do this for my MS. So, and while I'm doing it, I might as well just knowing that I'm not going to get any followers for it, but just post them on, just to motivate me to speak out loud and to read. A lot of struggles. Anyways, a meeting of Urantians. In my search for a solution to the continuing puzzle, I attended a Sunday afternoon meeting of the Urantians in San Francisco. There were 10 of us in a small classroom, facing a tall, strong woman in her late 50s, dressed in purple and mauve. Next to the blackboard was a complicated chart showing Nevadon, Narantian, and the Isle of Paradise. Several participants were regular students advanced in knowledge of seraphic planetary government and other abstruse concepts. I think part of the problem is we have such a lack of meaning in this life, within Modernia, that it's human nature to gravitate to something that, even if it's just our imagination, just more meaning. The subject of the afternoon's lecture was the function of the thought adjusters. That doesn't sound good. And the extremely complex cosmology of Arantia. They come from other worlds to live within our brains. They influence our actions by subtle sabotage of our physical and chemical functions. A typical part of the delusion dealt with in higher masters. Student: I wonder how they got our plane. Instructor: they are received here and channeled. A girl. I thought I heard that the channel was a taxi driver in Chicago. Is that true? Instructor: that's one more story. We don't get told very much about the origins, but I can tell you what I think. Dr. William Sadler, who was a very fine surgeon, became interested in mediumship, and he has written a book in which you find that most mediums are only victims of suggestion, but that he found two exceptions, a man and a woman. In their case, he feels that the data was definitely coming from superhuman source. He had many hundreds of sessions with these people. Vallée: in what year was the book revealed? Instructor: 1934. It wasn't published until 1955. The woman who typed the original manuscript is still living. She is a very dynamic woman. She types in 3 times. She was a federal bank examiner. The puzzlement of Dr. Sadler. I got the itch fits. It's going to start getting cold in the next couple of days. I need to go get my shopping done. That's one thing I got to do. I also need to get my sleep pattern right. I got to get back in my own book. I got 23 words. Is it 23,000 words or 21? 22,000. I can't remember how many words I got. 22,000 words. That's 12,000 there and 10,000 on the other page. My book. And I'm still working on 2018. I hope it's going to be very informative. It's going to be fascinating. It's a cross between, I'm calling it something like, well, the concept, I just keep it to myself for now. But it's stuff I've been studying the past 10 years and how they all collided between religion, um, the anomalous world, the 14 anomalous world, and science. I mean, what a collision it's been. Okay, we get back into Messengers of Deception, UFO Contacts and Cults, Jacques Vallée. So I'm at 27,000 words now. My book. It's a lot of work writing a book. You see why it takes so long to write a book. My first attempt. It might be my only chance, so I got to make it happen. Do you know that fire of Chicago in 1871, I believe it is? Did you know that it lasted 3 days and that 100,000 people lost their homes? Just literally. Covered 3.3 miles. 17,500 buildings were destroyed. That's in Chicago alone. But most people don't realize is the fire of Chicago, that was not the only fire that happened that day. Up in Wisconsin, huge areas, and not only Wisconsin, Michigan, the state of Michigan, on the east and the west side of Michigan, there were fires. Detroit, and that fire is actually extended to Canada, and they talk about these fire balloons, and a lot of people think that a comet hit the area. They talk about balls of fire. I'm thinking about reading about it. Anyway, it's just a side note. We're in a puzzlement of Dr. Sandler. Some point you guys will hear this, I imagine. Hopefully it's not too bad of a recording. I'm not any good at reading out loud, but got to do it from my own voice. It's funny. So this summer I started playing the acoustic guitar, right? I mean, I played it off and on, but never seriously tried to play it. And then I also discovered something, and it helped for me to start my book, to discipline myself to do something consistently. Yeah, MS gets in the way, you know what I mean? And I learned it. I used to write songs and sing. I can't sing. Can't sing over the guitar. I don't have a voice. Anyways, the puzzlement of Dr. Sandler. I came away from the meeting with a precarious sense of accomplishment. A number of real people truly believed in Melchizedek and his cosmic role, and I found a reference to a man, apparently a serious scientist, who had known the founder of Urantia sect, and after serious examination had pronounced its revelations genuine. Actually, I bring this up in my book as well about the cult of Melchizedek, or the order of Melchizedek. And it ties, the thing about the book I'm talking about too is about these angels. How whenever these angels show up, bad things happen. Literally. Okay. I looked up, not that Melchizedek was an angel, but there's hardly any in the Bible. There's hardly anything in it. Just a few references, right? The book of Hebrews and then Genesis, and that's it. And people have made up all sorts of stuff. I looked up Sandler's name in the index of Stanford Library and quickly found that he was a writer of talent and considerable scholarship. His book, The Physiology of Faith, which is an interesting name, and Fear, published in Chicago in 1920, lists his titles as Professor of Physiologic Therapy at the University of Chicago Medical School, and Director of the Chicago Institute of Physiologic Therapeutics. In 1929, he was also senior attending surgeon at Columbus Hospital. In the preface of the Physiology of Faith and Fear, he offers a statement of his own interest when he observes, "We are now passing through a period of popular reaction against the scientific materialism of last century. The common people are awakening to the fact that the mental state has much to do with bodily health and disease. The bookmarks and their efforts to satisfy the universal demand for teaching on various phases of mental healing have flooded us with literature, much of which is premature, unscientific, incomplete, and highly disastrous in its misleading influence upon the popular mind and morals. This fine principle, which we would do well to remember in these, I should probably remember that too. Anyways, in these psychic ripoffs, led Dr. Sandler to consider the phenomena of spirit communication and automatic writing, which he generally found to be false and misleading. Dr. Sandler goes on to condemn charms, relics, shrines, and various forms of quackery, astrology, palmistry, and crystal gazing, trances, and catalepsy. He writes, "None of it is not uncommon to find," let me try this, "it's not uncommon for persons in a cataleptic trance to imagine themselves taking trips to other worlds. In fact, the wonderful account of their experiences, which they write out after the cataleptic attacks, are so unique and marvelous as to serve as the basis for founding new sects, cults, and religions." He explains these phenomena, as well as the automatic writing and speaking, by the projection of marginal consciousness without the awareness of the central consciousness. One wonders what Dr. Sandler would have to say about current best-selling books based on automatic writing, such as Jan Roberts' Seth material, which have had a major effect on the public. In his latter book, The Mind at Mischief, published in 1929 and subtitled Tricks and Deception of the Subconscious and How to Cope with Them, he develops his theory of dissociation, double personality, and automatic writing. He concludes, "We now have a thoroughly scientific hypothesis which will account for all phenomena of this kind that deserve to be classified as genuine. Nothing as yet has ever come to us through automatic writing which bears any evidence of supernatural origin, or which contains authentic truths, facts, or principles heretofore unknown to the human race." Having said this, however, Sandler refers refers the reader to an appendix, quote, for a brief notice of a very unusual case of supposedly automatic writing associated with other psychic phenomena which came under my observation many years ago. In this appendix, Sandler is evidently dealing with the Book of Urantia, although he never mentions the word. The appendix deserves to be quoted extensively, for it sheds much light on the scientific methods that can be applied to alleged communications from cosmic entities. Dr. Sandler begins the appendix with a reversal of his previous stated theoretical position. In the interest of scientific accuracy on the one hand and of strict fairness on the other, it becomes necessary to explain that there are one or more exceptions to the general statement that all cases of psychic phenomena which have come under my observation have turned out to be those of autopsychism. Sandler goes on to describe his contacts with the channel, unquote, of the Urantia book, who may have been a former stockbroker. The exception has to do with a rather peculiar case of psychic phenomenon, one which I find myself unable to classify, and which I would like very much to narrate more fully. I cannot do so here, however, because of a promise which I feel under obligation to keep sacredly. In other words, I have promised not to publish this case during the lifetime of the individual. I was brought in contact with it in the summer of 1911, and I have had it under my observation more or less ever since, having been present at probably 250 of the night sessions, many of which have been attended by a stenographer who made voluminous notes. A thorough study of this case has convinced me that it is not one of ordinary trance. While the sleep seems to be quite of a natural order, it is very profound, and so far we have never been able to awake the subject when in this state. But the body is never rigid, and the heart action is never modified. The respiration is sometimes markedly interfered with. This man is utterly unconscious, wholly oblivious to what takes place, and unless told about it subsequently, never knows that he has been used as a sort of clearinghouse for the coming and going of alleged extraplanetary personalities. My italics. In fact, he is more or less indifferent to the whole proceeding and shows a surprising lack of interest in these affairs as they occur from time to time. Sandler draws a clear distinction between this case and the usual spiritualist phenomenon. In no way are these night visions like the seances associated with spiritualism. At no time during the period of 18 years of observation, have there been a communication from any source that claimed to be the spirit of a deceased human being. The communications which have been written, or which we have had the opportunity to hear spoken, are made by a vast order of alleged beings who claim to come from other planets to visit this world. To stop here as student visitors for study and observation when they are en route from one universe to another. The medical expert goes on to explain why this case forces him to revise many ideas in his approach. 18 years of study and careful investigation have failed to reveal the psychic origin of these messages. Psychoanalysis, hypnotism, intensive comparison fail to show that the written or spoken messages of this individual have origin in his own mind. Much of the material secured through this subject is quite contrary to his habits of thought and to the way in which he has been taught and to his entire philosophy. Having acknowledged that he is at a loss to explain these facts with classical answers, he presents a summary of this unique material. He can only say that I have found in these years of observation that all the information imparted through this source has proved to be consistent within itself. While there is considerable difference in the quality of the communications, this seems to be reasonably explained by a difference in state of development and order of the personalities, making the communication, its philosophy, is consistent. William Sandler, who thus studied the channel, unquote, of Urantia, had the unusual courage to confess that after 18 years of study, I find myself at the present time just where I was when I started. We might ask ourselves the same question about UFOs and their alleged agents among us, a phenomenon that leaves physical traces must be taken seriously. But what can we say of the people who claim to be in contact with superior intelligences emanating from these objects? What should we do about their claim that the phenomenon of UFOs is directing the evolution of mankind? This idea, which once attracted only a handful of devotees, now has the potential to draw the attention of the media and make a major impact. The claim is even made that if we fail to listen to the voice of the higher levels, there will be a major catastrophe on Earth. It reminds me so much of Abraham and Lot and their interaction with the three men. From the gentle belief in higher forms of life bent on helping mankind, we have gone to explore increasingly disturbing systems of philosophy, some new faiths that demand total obedience from their followers. It sounds like the Jesuits. The forces they released were not forces of love, but of disorder and violence. Now, yet they were forces of change, bending those who allowed themselves to be used. Melchizedek, UFOs, and the sex function. That's interesting. The psychopathology of the contactees was the next area to explore. I began reading everything I could locate about Melchizedek and found references of him in the book of Leadbetter, or Leadbeater, depending on which you pronounce it. Better, I guess it's Leadbeater. But it was in the works of another contemporary, Madame Blavatsky, that I picked up the trail again. Madame Blavatsky, the colorful author of Isis Unveiled, was an extraordinary leader of occult organizations in the 19th century, many of which still exist. According to Jacques Bergery, one of these organizations is the Helen Provna Blavatsky Foundation, of which Richard Nixon is a member of the board. President Nixon? I was not surprised, to be honest with you. The theosophy shit, that's the Nazis' fault, too. I have not been able to verify the statement. Hiram Erastus Butler, a Pennsylvanian by birth who died in 1916, was a simple, self-educated man who worked in a sawmill. Following an accident in which he lost several fingers, he became a recluse, and for 14 years he lived as a hermit. During these years, Butler was favored with many revelations from God and developed a peculiar philosophy of the sect which is still known today as the American branch of the Order of Melchizedek. In late 1880s, Butler came out of secularism and described his revelations in a series of lectures in Boston. In 1889, he moved to California with a dozen disciples, homesteaded a 260-acre area overlooking the American River near Applegate in Placer County, and built a mystical center. When a journalist visited his esoteric fraternity in 1971, he found an old 4-story house at the end of a dirt road and only 2 surviving members, William Corrico, 89, the 4th president of the organization, and his brother Stephen, who had recently buried the last female member of the sect. They met in the library. As he talked to Corrico, swayed back and forth in a creaky old rocker beside a pot-belly stove that warmed the musty library. The Bible says that when 144,000 persons establish the Order of Melchizedek, the kingdom of God will be established on earth, and that was our hope. We've all lived on earth hundreds of times before. The population of the world remains constant. Souls that leave at death reappear in the newborn. Corrico retraced the history of the group that came to California with Butler. They had built the 18-room house from timber on the property. They made their own furniture too. They planted and harvested their own crops and had a small herd. The rest of their time was taken up with meditation and writing. Oh God. What do I do now? I've been hanging around people like this for 10 years and I'm deconstructing right before my eyes, and there ain't nowhere to go, and I'm too old to frickin' go anywhere else. What the hell did one do? I mean, not that I believed in this stuff in particular, but at one time I thought Melchizedek was something special, and there's something we were supposed to, because of Jesus and all that. Now I realize that none of it's special except for mind control. That's it. They planted and harvested their own crops. The rest of the time they take over the meditation writing. They operated their own publishing house and they still sell about 20 books and pamphlets. One of these by Enoch Penn, first copyrighted, and it has this thing, Enoch Penn, and this drawing, and the six-pointed star, and this order of Melchizedek, and then it has like a six-pointed star and a ball, and the one earlier is just like a circle in a square, or a square in the circle. They got that thing going on. It's all this esoteric stuff that we actually we hadn't do it. Is we just make up our own shit about it, because the people that claim that they know what it means, you realize they're making up shit. So you're just, what's the difference? Just by making your own shit, right? Figure 7.1, cover of a book by Enoch Penn, an early leader of the Order of Melchizedek in the United States. Although published in 1926, this book contains several of the themes that have since become popular in contactee literature, courtesy of Valet Collection. I guess that'd be Shock's last name. And in 1926, so one of these by Enoch Penn, is first copied in 1926, states the philosophy of the order and describes 4 degrees of initiation. The prerequisite for joining the fraternity is to abstain absolutely from sexual activity, of course. Acting according to Penn, there are 2 great truths, or natural facts, in the world. First, there is a more subtle life which is interior to life that makes the physical man live. A man can become more conscious of and live from that more interior life, which includes meeting and associating with the inhabitants of the spirit world. Second, the key to this contact is the suppression of the orgasm. And they talk about this stuff all the time, right? And the crystal oil, the rising of the oil, right? And they talk about, from your chakras, and actually it's through your spinal cord, right? And that goes to your pineal gland. And then if you abstain from sex for at least a month, I think it's 30 or 40 days, or a moon cycle is what it is, right? And that's supposed to, really make you do something spiritual for you, right? Or you stop beating yourself over the head for being a human being and just allow yourself to have an orgasm once in a while. Jeez. There resides in the substance of procreation in the seed a power which, if the seed is retained in the body, will in time cause the soul to awaken to a consciousness of, and in the realm of the spirit, the realm where dwell those intelligences who are the creators of man. And the problem is, then you start interacting these things, and you get nothing worth a damn. That's the problem. That's what I've observed. People argue with it, but then when you ask them what great wisdom have you learned, they can't give it to you. I mean, they can't, especially if you ask the questions. They can't. If you're getting great wisdom, people should be able to ask you questions, and you should give them answers. Now, skirt around it. And most of those questions will require a yes or no. This is a complicated way to state that the followers of Tantra, yoga, and other Eastern sex practices have always said, namely, the control and suppression of the orgasm was a key to spiritual bliss. Esoteric fraternity of Hiram Butler is more extreme, however, renouncing normal orgasm is only the pledge of the first degree. The second degree, the initiate must avoid all sexual impulse, even in thought. And the second degree, there is not only the effort to overcome generative impulse, and its results in the body, but to learn of and avoid all those sensations, impulses, emotions, thoughts, and relationships that lead to and cause these impulses. The neophyte must so shut his sympathies from all who belong to generation as not to share in their life currents and desires. Taking this position, Hiram Butler and his followers differ from the Eastern mystics who teach their students to use their desires instead of suppressing them, and to reabsorb the sexual energy into the body instead of releasing it. An occult plan to control the world. Butler's version of the Order of Melchizedek is an esoteric group complete with initiations, passwords, and secret handshakes. I wonder where he got all those ideas. His purpose is occult work with political ambitions. The power to overthrow nations cannot be had in its fullness until the neophytes, as sons of God, have gathered together to work together as a unit. How would such a small group of initiates control the world? One of these powers operates through what is called mob psychology. The vast majority of the people are controlled wholly by their feelings, and he who can play on the feelings of the masses can control them. These lines were first published in 1926 at a time when control of the mob through psychology was already becoming a well-understood tool. Melchizedekism had no doubt about their ultimate rise to power. Did not Revelation state that after the body of the 144 sons of God, and my gosh, that happened freaking 2,000 years ago with people, and they keep regurgitating the same things. That book of Bible is such a powerful book of mind control. Are gathered and sealed and have overcome death, they shall take the dominion under the whole heaven and shall reign forever and ever. Such was the grandiose plan of the followers of Hiram Butler. Their ultimate goal was even more ambitious in the higher stages of initiation. The adepts began to merge with the superior power of God, and they actually joined the Elohim. If a man can believe into the body of Elohim, then they once were men who have attained to such mastery that they are able to be that which they will do to be. I don't even said that. I don't even know what I just read there. He who seeks to attain to the fullness of the order of Melchizedek must learn to take the name of Yahweh. Oh my God, that's an evil spirit, so that he may have the needed strength to overcome the world. Be master of everything in nature. And this a delusion that never can happen. The similarities of the old esoteric fraternity to some of the modern UFO contactee groups are quite obvious. The puzzle is beginning to take shape. The HIM, H-I-M, sect, for instance, speaks of regeneration, transformation, and contact with a higher level in the same terms as Hiram Butler, who promises that there will open before him, the neophyte, a door in heaven. The mentioned contact with superior beings, such as in fact the Creator's purpose for man, added Butler. He should develop into a godlike being, having his knowledge and powers and qualities and attributes, and be accepted as a fellow among those godlike beings. The discipline of the fraternity is nothing but preparation for living among the angels. I don't know if that's a good idea, to be honest with you. The disciples must, from a social order like that in heaven. Then the holy ones in heaven will not only a time appear to men, but will come and abide among them as a father with his children. You might insult an angel calling him a UFO. The esoteric fraternity is no longer active in the hills of Applegate. The only operation still carried out in the old building is the printing and distribution of its literature. As a representative of the organization told me in 1976, if the order exists now, it's probably in heaven. It's not here. We just have the printed word. Wherever it exists, we're not aware of it. How can I learn more about it? Then I asked. There is someone back in New York who claims to belong to the order. We have this on file, but so many people are making so many claims. The only thing to do is to develop yourself enough where you don't have to get it secondhand. That's where the books point out your obligations. What about Dr. Grace Pittifer in San Francisco? I don't know her, but women can be redeemed too. Do you think she is a member of the same group? No, we have had many false prophets who, of course, everyone's a false prophet, who more or less made these claims. These are among who are around and may have part of the truth, but unless you develop yourself enough, you waste your time. This Order of Melchizedek we published, I hope, gets over the idea that there are no shortcuts. It's a lot of hard work, especially on yourself. You have to curb the desires that are not in harmony with the higher spirits. What relationship do your teachings have to the UFO phenomenon? The UFO came in after these two authors, Penn and Butler, went to their rest. Only thing we can say is that an angel can sometimes be a UFO, as well as a craft being a UFO. And so unless you develop yourself enough, you might be insulting some angel, calling him a UFO. So it almost gets to be a no man's land until you do your own developing. It doesn't mean there isn't anything in the secret preparations, but only there is nothing going on at this time. After this conversation, I was ready to conclude that the Order of Melchizedek in California was in bad shape, caught between its aspirations to gather 144,000 members and its predilection for avoiding orgasmic release. Some, after all, would have to make all those babies. Someone, after all, would have to make all those babies. I had reached this state of puzzlement when a psychologist friend sent me a copy of the newsletter of the California Institute of Transpersonal Psychology based in Menlo Park. The newsletter contained the following announcements. On the last weekend before holidays, during our time with Zellman Sketchter, and with his inspiration and support, 11 second-year students were initiated into the Order of Melchizedek. This is a priestly order of more than 2,000 years of tradition. Well, actually, I think Melchizedek is supposed to exist way more than 2,000 years. We're talking like, what, 5,000 years ago? Of course, it's all made up, but I don't want to prove any of it. This is a priestly order of more than Melchizedek is mentioned in Genesis chapter 14 as the priest of God the Most High. I forgot to put the "the" there. Who brought bread and wine and initiated Abraham. I did say that. Since the priests in the Jewish tradition, in the Roman Catholics, and the Anglican Communion have all been initiated as priests of the Melchizedek. Apparently, the author of the newsletter did not know about the Mormon tradition, which also gives a prominent place to the priests of Melchizedek. He did offer his personal feelings about being initiated in the order. We all need some purpose in our life. That's what the problem is. We all need purpose in our life. And most of the time, life is outside of finding a chick to have sex with. And what else what purpose was there? Those of us who were initiated on Sunday, March 12th, were first baptized by Zalman, Zalman, and the hot tub at Regina's, and received new names. The experience was profound and a fitting culmination of the work with Zelma during the week on the 10 Sephiroth and Kabbalistic tree of life. What a mess. Jean Gaston was our congregation representing the community. What will happen next is to be seen and pondered deeply. At the very least, we will be meeting together to talk of what the meaning of the priesthood is for each one of us. This is taking place in the middle of Silicon Valley, California, the world's major electronics manufacturing center, within a few miles of the headquarters of such high technology companies as Merrimax, Lockheed, Abdul, Hewlett and Packard, and those are old names, man. Right? Old names. They're still around, though. A group of young people, perhaps the sons and daughters of scientists and managers at these corporations, take off their clothes and jump into somebody's hot tub to renew the tradition of the Melchizedek priesthood. The esoteric, harmless writing of poor Hiram Butler and the innocuous teachings of Enoch Penn have found a powerful resonance in the most unlikely place of all. The first post-industrial generation is the most advanced country on earth. I am invited to become a conscientiousness. I am invited to become a consciousness reprogrammer. The Order of Melchizedek was flourishing again, even though the old organization in Applegate was reduced to preservation of printed word. A new community named Stell, I'm assuming it's Stelly, probably, capital Stelle, has been started in Illinois by a group which derives its entire philosophy from Melchizedek, whom they believe to preside over the archangelic host of our solar system, helped by billions of masters from the planet Clarion. Then a man named Jim Hurtak called me and triggered a new stream of information. He was a friend of Andreja Puharich, I guess that's how I pronounce it, was deeply involved in the Uri Geller affair and claimed to be psychic himself. Not only was he psychic, but he also had a number of UFO encounters and was sure that he had come in direct contact with the higher order of consciousness. On April 1st, 1976, Hurtak and Puharich were on a talk show broadcast in San Francisco. Jim explained his involvement with the Center for Democratic Studies, a think tank located in Santa Barbara, California. He said he was there as a visiting sinologist, a Chinese specialist. The interviewer pointed out that many people think that it's a commie organization because of the proposed new constitution. It's a very controversial place because of that. Jim replied, "It has been a rallying point to motivate people to do deeper problem solving. If anything, it has been a shot in the arm to get better government and put out better philosophy of humanism towards planetary unity." Puharich gave details of a contact scene near Tel Aviv, of course it would be, when he was in the desert with Giller. He saw this blue light flashing, and Yuri walked into this UFO. It was night, and I couldn't actually see the final entrance into the UFO. He came out carrying a glass object that disappeared 3 days earlier. Jim Hurtak described his own contact. "Well, believe it or not, I was giving a series of seminars 3 years ago, and coming back with 2 of my students, we noticed light following our car down Highway 152. We pulled off the road and roughly 100 to 200 yards from the road, this vehicle came down. I felt strong magnetic attraction in the direction of the vehicle. I experienced at that time what most people would call the higher intelligence. A beam of light went through my body, and I received scientific codes, which I was told to call the keys of Enoch, of course. He didn't say how or why he had received these mysterious codes. Jim invited me to join a new psychic group designed to change the destiny of the world by occult means. He was in direct contact with this group, he said, and had important news to share with me at the first opportunity. He explained that there were, on one side, what he called benevolent programmers, who allowed planetary societies a free will. And obviously not getting that to us here. And then there are the poachers. who interfere with the programs already underway. The Brotherhood of Melchizedek deals with the consciousness reprogramming. It's a very special order with very special people. He claimed one of his keys deals with where the Brotherhood has been in the previous centuries. Jim stressed the need for me to join his group. We agreed to meet the next day for lunch. The keys he had mentioned were part of a manuscript entitled The Biocomputer Keys to Our Consciousness Time Zone, and revealed to me by master control messengers, Metatron, and Opthanim. I guess it's Opthanim? Opthanim? So, of course, Metatron's always going to be involved, right? The book, which was signed Enoch, was written in flaming letters and Kabbalistic style. It was, for the most part, just as important for me to understand as the magnetic aura of Dr. Grace Pettifer. Was some hidden truth contained in the jargon? Was there a needle in the haystack? I decided to keep my appointment with Jim and find out. No grounds for fear. We met in a restaurant, and Jim came to the point immediately. When he had a series of contact experiences with Enoch 3 years earlier, he was apparently told to set up a think tank which would be known on some levels as the Sons of Light of the Order of Melchizedek. It would work directly with the Brotherhoods, who were fields of intelligence going between star systems and reprogramming the lower evolutionary systems. I asked him if he was aware that the book of Uranta also said that the Melchizedeks were an order of beings who roamed among planets. Not only was he aware of that, but he knew that there are two Mormon priesthoods, the lower priesthood and the higher one, which, by the way, I grew up a Mormon and even went on a Mormon mission. I left the Mormon church. I had 2 months left of my mission when I found out it was total farce. That's what happened to me, folks. That's what really happened to me. And I had both the higher and lower priesthood. The Aaronic was the lower and the higher was the Melchizedek. As he says here, the higher one is of the priesthood of Melchizedek. This idea of the interrelationships between all religions leads him to some fantastic vistas. I have been told that there are councils of light, which are organizational boards where the archangels or ascended masters organize all the codes pertinent both to the visible spectrum as well as other spectrums that we are not aware of. I was told that beginning in 1976, between April 18th and May 18th, the Brotherhoods would begin to define the blueprint for the space-time overlap, which was going to literally re-educate and reorganize the human community to find its destiny in space, because it, in essence, had failed the program. What does that have to do with the UFOs seen by people around the country? I asked him, at a loss to understand why the Ascended Masters needed a space-time overlap. The UFOs are merely one aspect of the higher evolutionary technology, and they are used to impress upon civilizations purely model controlling the technology. Did I get that right? Excuse me. Impress upon the civilizations purely in the material range of technology, that there is a higher energy model controlling the technology. You see, the UFOs do not travel according to the teachings of Enoch. They have their own energy field by combining what we call magneto-hydrodynamic energy, parallel phase electromagnetic energy. They are able to literally go several times the speed of light as we calculate it. It's a mode of propulsion. I asked, hoping to get a more prosaic theory from him. There was no way to make him explain it clearly. He came right back to Melchizedek, replying, "It's their mode of propulsion, yes. The Order of Melchizedek is one of the higher orders of the various space brotherhoods. There are 70 such brotherhoods that comprise the Sons of Light and the White Brotherhood, as it is known in some popular literature in our particular local universe. And they, at this present time, have, shall we say, been through a tremendous house cleaning. Among the negatives, the poachers, as I call them, who come in and experiment with someone else's experiments, have been a brotherhood known as the Asterians. I guess that's how you pronounce it, Asterians, as well as the Marianites, who are of a grotesque appearance, as well as reticulates, who are also of a grotesque appearance. How can you tell one group from the other? The guidelines are very clear if you look at the historical documents which acknowledge that. Along with the appearance of UFOs, there is the bringing of a cosmic law which is distinct from those which do not bring a spiritual teaching. The more advanced extraterrestrials do not look differently from humans, with the facial features of biological societies that somehow are part of the same galactic tree of knowledge. So they would look like us. I feel this is the basis of why it is said in the book of Genesis that man was created in the image. It is progressive. It is not static. This is spelled out with the definition of the various life thresholds at the beginning of the very sacred text. Why was Jim telling me all this? Why was he writing a book? Again, he gave me political reasons. I was told that I was to come out at this time with the information because mankind was going to go through a collective, here we go, Christ experience of worshiping UFOs and receiving information. Well, this has been almost 50 years. Well, 47 years and it still hasn't happened, has it? I would help mankind balance. It will help mankind balance its political focus. Well, that hasn't worked. You see, the interesting thing, Jacques, is that we must emphasize the fact that we are receiving a new program. We do not have to go through the old programming of Armageddon. Contact with within 18 months. And it's now 47 years, and apparently this prophecy, like so many others, in fact 99.999% of them, haven't come true. If any of them, for that matter, basically. At the end of our meeting, Jim said he wanted to share with me something that I could keep in mind, a statement that he had prepared with Pahorich, a sensitive who was working for the American Navy. That's a red flag right there. And other friends of his in various positions who had access to confidential and secret information. I believe that the Earth will be contacted within the next 18 months by highly involved intelligent beings from another world, from other worlds. This belief has come about as a result of a study of prophetic literature, claimed UFO contacts, a recent forecast, and countless other materials. Jim was following the usual pattern: illumination, belief in contact, mental changes, and finally prophecy. 18 months have passed and nothing has happened. That too is typical. In fact, it's always that way. From an exploration of the Theosophists and Hiram Butler, I had followed the modern Melchizedek, trying to say this, Melchizedecians into their colorful fantasies. I had identified a complete paranoia of organizations, cults, and groups that had in common the idea that a superior group of manipulators was controlling the earth. On that higher plane, the order of Melchizedek was said to be supreme, to rule the affairs of man. They allegedly intervened on earth through their agents in religion, the arts, and science. Well, if that's the case, they're doing a damn good job of manipulating us with it, haven't they? Because, man, there's nothing but fucking lies coming out of that shit. They allegedly intervened on Earth through their agent. Okay, I just read that. It had even been suggested that I become involved myself. That by doing so, by so doing, I would help in averting World War III and a global Holocaust. Yeah, well, they seem to be feeling that one too. How seriously should one take these claims? Would these fears and these fantastic claims die in some forgotten corner, like the works of Butler and Penn? My feeling, as I continue exploring the world of these groups, was that of groping through a damp, gloomy cave. My reasons for declining the invitation, for refusing to become involved with the Sons of Melchizedek, were not based on some scientific idea of the impossibility of the contact they promised. Such unproven contact, for all I know, may be occurring every day. But contact with what? With genuine beings from space? With some dark part of the human mind, alive with delusions and strange fears? A whole spectrum of human folly and of human greatness has passed before me since I had begun this investigation. This search had led me through several countries, showing me that the idea of contact with the messengers of deception was nothing new, that it was capable of triggering fantastic passions. I had become aware of some of the pretty shady business behind the apparently harmless antics of the contactee groups. Now I wanted to focus my attention on the problem at hand, the question of who was doing all this and what their designs on us might be. 8. The puppets. The question of how men first came to be religious is shrouded in the unknowable past. What accounts for the rise and evolution of new religious groups in society? The question remains unanswered. Although it has received more attention than any other problem in the sociology of religion. Glock and Stark, Religion and Society in Tension. So that's the book, Religion and Society in Tension. A reporter named O'Hara, who works for the San Francisco Chronicle, goes through the streets of this magnificent city and poses a different question every day to the people he meets. When he asks, are UFO beings among us now? A truck driver from Cupertino, with long black hair and a mustache said, no, but I don't doubt there are people who do exist somewhere else, because the UFOs are coming from somewhere, but I don't think they need to send anyone down here to observe us. I don't doubt the existence of UFOs, but among us, no. A lot of weird people are walking around, but you can't blame them on outer space. Another man, a TV production worker, wearing thin glasses and a thin smile, seemed to agree. No, he said, but I am convinced of the existence of flying saucers because Carol and I saw one in La Jala. It was sort of diamond shaped with a number of the points of flashing lights. At first we thought it was an especially bright star until it started moving away. We were completely sober. We hadn't been drinking or dropping anything. I don't think beings are among us, but I am certain flying saucers are capable of observing us. A classic description. First we thought it was a star, says the witness. Now he has to add, we were completely sober. His girlfriend, Carol, who is an insurance company employee, stressed she had not seen Star Wars or Close Encounters. She believed that creatures from outer space did not need to come among us. They can find out what they need to know by hovering around. Not one of the 7 people responding expressed the slightest doubt that flying saucers existed, and they automatically assumed that they came from outer space. Three of the answers stated that the UFO people are among us now. I figured 8-1. They can take about any form they want. This seems to might be possible, said Pauline, a student with pretty clear eyes. There could easily be space beings among us because saucers keep landing and people are probably getting off them. A forklift operator from San Leandro agreed completely. They probably look upon us as primitive beings, he said. They're watching us all the time, picking out the good ones, the ones they want. And Gary, a construction worker had the last word. Yes and no, there are space beings among us. Me and my mom saw a flying saucer just out of Rochelle, Illinois. Rochelle, Illinois, is that how you pronounce it? Rochelle? Sorry if you didn't say that near your city, right? Anybody hears this? There were two of them darting in and out of the clouds. Lots of people see spaceships but don't report them because they're afraid of being laughed at. What is anybody going to do about it anyways? In Europe, and especially in France, where the scientific community is philosophically determined to defend a certain idea, then it has this thing here. Question, man, UFO beings, are they among us? And then it has these participants, the young people. And, okay. And it says here, a reporter interviewing people on the street in San Francisco recorded these views on the subject of contact with UFO beings. The response confirmed that the public is generally aware of the main features of the phenomenon, that some people are prepared to accept uncritically the idea that space people are already among us. Copyright Chronicle Publishing Company, 1977. So, let's get back here a little bit because I lost, as usual. So it says here, in Europe, especially in France, where the scientific community is philosophically determined to defend a certain idea of rationalism, such reactions from the public are received with laughter. What do you expect? A French space scientist once asked me, from such people who are untrained in science, the American public is naive and gullible, bombarded by Hollywood with sensational publicity for science fiction movies. Such crazy movements and cults would never have a chance in France. Of course, we already read this. Far from the case. The French researchers place in the same bag the UFO cultists and the scientists who research parapsychology. Interviewing French space expert Claude Poher in 1978, for example, the popular magazine Paris Match made this incredible statement: you are refuting the parapsychology hypnosis suggests provoked hallucination, etc. Therefore, the phenomenon seems to have a objective reality. And everywhere we go, there's this. Oh my God! Does anybody have any other imagination? That six-pointed star with the SWAT sticker in the middle. God, it never occurred to Paris Match that the phenomena could be real, both in a physical sense and in a psychic sense. Similarly, French intellectuals regard UFO cultists and contactees as an American aberration. I was amused, therefore, when I discovered that one of the largest Urantia organizations was based in France, as is a branch of the Order of Melchizedek. And I was even more amused when I met Monsignor Vorelhan. Raul tells the truth. Claudia Vorelhan is a young reporter living in Clermont-Ferrand, France. I guess it's Ferrand, France, maybe? Clairement Ferrand France, a racing enthusiast and a bearer of surprising news. We are living, he says, in the last days of the world. This was revealed to him on December 13th, 1973, as he was hiking in the old volcano country near his home. The weather was foggy and overcast. He suddenly saw a blinking red light, and something like a helicopter came down and hovered 2 yards above ground. It was the size of a small bus, conical on top. There was a flashing white light. Everybody says the world's going to end, and it's in it forever and a day. What's going on here? Then he's got this figure 8-2, the sign seen by Varelhan. Compare with figure 5-1 and 5-7-1 contactee symbols of 10 combined well-known designs into new patterns. Of course, we got the Star of David, the alleged Star of David, with a swastika in the middle of it. Might as well, huh? At the apex of the cone, red lights was underneath. A stairway appeared, and a childlike occupant came out, smiling with a glow around his body. On the craft and on the pilot green suit, on the craft and on the pilot's green suit was a symbol combining a swastika and the Star of David, and the pinnacle given to me by the French Order of Melchizedek also shows the Star of David. And damn, that Star of David's everywhere, isn't it? Because I tell you what, the operatives from the Zionists have done a hell of a fucking job, along with the Jesuits and the Freemasons, and mind screwing the hell out of us, haven't they? Whew. And whoever else is involved with all the other secret societies, the brotherhoods that are around here today. Anyways, what it comes down to is just the oligarchs, and it's class warfare, and they feed us crap all day long. Anyways, the pinnacle given to me by the French Order also showed a Star of David with a spinning pattern inside. The Volrahan symbol is supposed to mean as above, so below, and everything runs in cycles. Remember, Waite's commentary on Melchizedek. He raised the world below to the height of that which is above. Volrahan looked at the creature, and the creature smiled. Where do you come from? Very far away. Oh, that's really helpful. You speak French? I speak every language on Earth. You come from another planet? Yes. You just said that. Or kind of that way. No, if you live very far away, I guess it doesn't have to live on another planet, I guess. Yes. Is this your first visit to Earth? Oh, no. How have you come here many times? And the mindfuckery keeps going. Very often. That's the least you could say? Why did you come here? Today I come to speak to you. Vellerhan proceeds to tell us the story of his encounter with the glowing child, followed by several sessions of note-taking under his supervision. The story is naive, absurd. It reads like a space opera written by a 12-year-old. Why did you pick me? For many reasons. First, we need someone who lived in a country where new ideas are well received. France is the country where democracy was born. Her image on the entire earth is that of the land of freedom. The pilot added that Vollerhan had also been selected because he was a free thinker without being anti-religious. Oh, that's interesting. Anti-religious. Without being anti-religious. He was not a scientist, and therefore would explain things simply without complicating it. He wasn't a professional writer either, and thus wouldn't make up convoluted sentences that most people wouldn't be able to read. Finally, they picked him because he was born in 1946, after the first atomic bomb. It's ironic, isn't it? The visitor told Volhan to come back the next day and bring along his Bible. Fuck. They had half a dozen meetings, successive mornings, and the little man gave Volhan his new name, Raul. I guess that's how it goes. R-A-E-L, Raul. During these meetings, Raul claims that he received commentaries on the most significant parts of the Bible. He gathered his notes in a book and probably published by Message Editions in 1974, entitled The Message Given by the Extraterrestrials. It tells a strange tale of man's creation by scientists of an advanced space civilization who later disagreed on our development, thus splitting the gods into a camp led by Jawa and one by Satan. One led by Satan. So it's Jawa and Satan. I guess it's supposed to be Jehovah, but it says Jawa. We are also living in the last days of an age. Well, that's not the end of the world. And there's always eons. In order to make further progress, we need to make drastic political changes. First, we must wipe out democracy. Oh, fuck. That's exactly what the oligarchs want to do. You must eliminate elections and votes that are completely ill-adapted to the current evolution of mankind. Yes, let's go back to pure feudalism. Men are the useful cells of a large body called humanity. A cell in the foot doesn't have to say whether or not the hand should pick up an object. The brain decides, and if the object is good, the cell in the foot will profit by it. A world government and a new monetary system must be created. A single language will serve to unify the planet. Well, shit. You know, I'm writing my book, and Grammarly says it's at a 7th grade level. So at least it's a couple grades higher than the Bible. So it also says how stupid I am. Anyways, it is curious to find such themes under the pen of a contactee in Clermont-Ferrand, since the same theories are advocated by Mr. T in California in his California mansion. Finally, the military service must be discontinued in all countries. Then the Elohim will come back to the earth, and they will give us the benefit of their superior science. If, on the other hand, man remains aggressive, then they will wipe out our scientific centers as they did once with Sodom and Gomorrah. And, jeez, it must be the same thing as Chicago and frickin'. I mean, reading this stuff, not reading, I've been watching videos and thinking about reading a book about it. the Great Fire of Chicago and what happened in Wisconsin and the state of Michigan and Windsor and parts of, I guess, Ontario, Canada, in which, millions of acres were burnt in a 3-day period. And that first day, I mean, in Chicago, the portion of Chicago that burned down, they claim 100,000 people lost their lives. Not lives, their homes. And they said maybe up to 300 people died in that fire there. But all total, like 1,200 people died from that fire in all 3 states. And Illinois, Wisconsin, and Michigan. And I don't know if anybody died in Windsor as well. What's interesting is right after the Civil War, by the way, and that's something to think about. And so you have, and they had, the burning and pillaging that they did in the South. I wonder if it was retaliation at the end of the day. It talks about these fiery balloons that people saw in the sky as well. It also, people suggested or thought maybe it has something to do with a comet. But then again, it could have been homegrown terrorists. You have no idea. Maybe they all thought the world was going to end. Maybe they wanted to play another role of Sodom and Gomorrah. By the way, that Sodom and Gomorrah, the story of Sodom and Gomorrah, would be in my book. And because one of the things I'm going to argue, at least in the Bible, those things that are called angels, that everyone thinks so highly of, when you really study the Bible, you'll discover something. Every time an angel shows up, bad things happen. Across the board, it doesn't matter whether they work for Jehovah or Yahweh or not. Not to say that Jehovah or Yahweh are any good, any better, but that's for something else. Having returned home after the last meeting, Valorhan surveyed his notes and realized the immensity of the mission that he had been given. He decided to go ahead anyway, and even to ignore those who would make fun of him as an illuminated one. He reflected that it is better to be an illuminated one who knows than the enlightened man who doesn't. To those who disbelieve his message, he would simply answer, "Look at the sky. You will see more and more apparitions." And that's the key, apparitions. Like ghosts that neither your scientists nor your military will be able to explain. The key to Valorhan's appeal is that he brings a simple, or rather a simplistic, solution to our worries. He confesses to himself in the conclusion of his book, "All these revelations have brought me such well-being and such an inner peace in this world where one doesn't know what to believe anymore." And here's the thing no one has ever known for all the generations, especially when you are ruled by other son of a bitches who want to do nothing more than exploit you and take advantage of you and control you. So if it's a problem with all of us, from the very beginning, for his children, it's just the contradictions are never ending. This place is a giant soul reincarnation. This is a soul trap matrix in my book. But how did you prove any of this stuff? You can't prove anything. I can't even prove what I just said. That's how crazy this whole existence is. Are we just nothing more than materialistic animals? And I don't know. I know one thing, I'm not that bright. And I know there's a lot of people that sound bright, but at the end of the day, no one seems to know what the fuck they're talking about. My excuse, my apology for swearing, and it's 5 in the morning, what the hell? My whole schedule has gone whacked. A world where professional scientists can't provide a precise enough explanation of our origin and our goals. In the light of these revelations, everything is cleared up and appears simple. What Vallerhan expresses here very well is the grave danger of contactee beliefs. Just like religions, just like the Jesuits, just like Christians and every other religious fanaticism, or beliefs for that matter. It was across the board. It doesn't matter if you believe in UFOs or... Everyone seems to think that the world's going to end tomorrow. And they thought that the generation before, and they thought that before that, and they thought that for 50 generations back, and 100 generations back, and they'll keep on thinking about it. And because we don't like this life, do we? It sucks. So we start to rationalize things with hope that some savior's going to show up. And you know what? The oligarchs, the elite, they know this, and they've been taking advantage of this forever and a day. They know how gullible we are. An unquestioned faith in external intervention that will bring simple answers to mankind. Hitler's first solution for humanity was equally simple. The themes are familiar, and you'll find it in religion, you find it in Christianity, you'll find it all over the place. So, it's one thing we learn about this, is that, and this is what I'm getting, the message I'm getting is, these things we call angels or demons or aliens, or UFOs or outer extraterrestrials, have been screwing with our heads. And apparently it doesn't take that much to screw with our heads. One, people don't know what to believe anymore because science and education have made it impossible to continue worshiping a good God with a long beard. Two, on the other hand, science and education have brought no real answers to the deeper questions in our minds. Where do we come from, and where are we going? Vallerhan's illumination has brought him an answer which is all the more convincing because it rests on faith alone. The little man has instructed him to start building a mansion for the returning Elohim. What do they need a mansion for? And Vallerhan has appealed to public support on French radio and television and has attracted some followers. Now he waits for the angels. Hey man, if you can make money and build your own mansion and convince people for the Elohim, you're no different than the Sadducees and the Pharisees and scribes and elders 2,000 years ago, right? With their temple. Or the Pope and the archbishops and the bishops and all their cathedrals and all that. And on it goes. If you get people to pay for you to do nothing and just pretend to be enlightened ones, what the hell? Vallerhan gave a public lecture in San Francisco in December 1976. A group of about 150 people paid $3 each to attend. By the time Vallerhan had described the details of his trip to the planet of the Elohim, a reporter observed that 5 persons had stomped out and 3 elderly ladies had lapsed into snoozing snores. Am I saying that right? Soothing snores. That's right. Into soothing snores. They missed the bathtub episode. And his new book, Beings from Outer Space, took me to their planet. Vallerhan writes, I put on my belt and found myself carried in front of the apparatus used to make robots. When I was seated, a splendid-looking dark-haired girl appeared in the three-dimensional luminous cube. My robot asked me if I liked her and wished to have different shapes or modify the face. I told him I found her perfect. The machine produced 5 more girls, and they accompanied Valrahan to his place, where he had an unforgettable bath. I bet. I'm picturing, of all people, Bono from U2, and with the little French girls all sitting on his lap. I bet you that was part of the whole. I probably got inspired by this story. Figure 8.3, when French contactee Claudia Valrahan lectured in California, he argued for the creation of a world government and a reformed monetary system, claiming that he was instructed to do so by the Elohim from another planet. Copyright Chronicle Publishing Company, 1978. I wish I was smart as these guys. I'm an idiot. I have no sense to even make up something like this. I have no talent. Where had he, unfortunately, he had unforgettable bath with his delightful robots who, he says, submitted to all my desires. Valrahan doesn't explain any of the contradictions in the story. Why would the Elohim want us to destroy democracy after selecting as a prophet a man born in France, the country of democracy and freedom? Why would they use for an insignia such a human terrestrial symbol as a swastika inside the Star of David? We should look for an answer in the direction of phenomena itself indicates it has human elements, yet is alien to us. It is physical in appearance, yet it also behaves like a projection from the unconscious. I suggest that it represents a technology like the television set that manipulates the perceptions of the human mind. One is tempted to say that Valrahan might have had an initial experience and that he later hallucinated the dialogue with the pilot and the subsequent encounters. The hallucination is a big word, however, and implies that nothing in the experience was real. This is not my intention. Whatever the technology, it is the effect that is interesting. New man Valrahan, like other contactees, is out to change the world. The manipulators, I have given this name to the hypothetical agents who might cause the UFO contacts and engineer their effects. Everything now centers on their role, their identity, their designs. Who could they be? Alien beings coming from the end of the galaxy? Psychic entities from the other side? Automata. Control. I think it means automatic control. I guess it is automata. I never seen that before. Automata controlled by some non-human consciousness, holographic nightmares. But perhaps we are looking far away from something which is right under our nose. Could they simply be human? Could they be masters of deception so skillful that they plan to counterfeit an invasion from space? That's Project Bluebeam. That's maybe he's going to bring up Braun, or whatever the hell his name is. It is not difficult to see that the same themes are running through the whole puzzle. Many contactees, for example, mentioned Atlantis. It does sound an awful lot like MK Ultra was involved in all this. If our self-styled space brothers need such a prehistoric pedigree, it is reasonable to expect them to come from some faraway star. The answer is both more mundane and more frightening. Beyond the attention of the academic science, below the dignity of official history, there are groups, cults, and sects that serve as leading indicators of mass movements. The myth of contact is such a leading indicator. I took all my papers one day and drove to the house of Major Murphy, who had advised me to pursue my research of the contactee groups. We quickly agreed that the popular idea of flying saucers from outer space left much to be explained. The major, who was still closely following government-funded research on parapsychology in the U.S. and seemed well aware of similar advances in the Soviet Union, suggested that the UFOs might not be spacecraft, but what he called psychotronic devices. In 1943, he said, as we sat in his study, we already had evidence that several countries were working on circular aircraft that they hoped to develop into secret weapons. The Germans were also doing advanced research on controlled electrical discharges and controlled lightning, and tried to combine these things together. When we invaded Germany, a lot of hardware fell into our hands, but the Russians had gotten most of the good stuff. Then people started seeing the modern UFOs in Sweden in 1946. He leaned back and lit a cigarette, not a cigar, leaving me with 1,000 questions. Why did he bring in the Germans and their secret weapons? It would be absurd to suggest that such devices could explain UFOs. Nobody seems to have documented that period, Major, I told him, to stimulate his recollections. General James Doolittle was sent to Sweden by the United States in 1946, apparently under cover of the Shell Corporation. In fact, he was to investigate the ghost rockets with the Swedish authorities. Whatever came of that, his conclusions have never been revealed, answered Major Murphy with a sigh that seemed to say, if only the Pentagon could talk. But it doesn't take much imagination to realize that his involvement meant considerable interest among the top brass. This was a year before Kenneth Arnold, mind you, and several years before the creation of Project Blue Book. Damn it, the Air Force didn't even exist in 1946. Murphy was obviously relishing an opportunity to think back to what had been a very exciting time for him, a time when military intelligence could do almost anything. One area where you must realize a lot of research had already been done in great secrecy in 1946 concerned mind control and the effects of electromagnetic radiation, what we now call ELF, extremely low frequencies on the human body. And what does that have to do with UFOs or with rockets or secret weapons? I asked rather brusquely. He told me how he took my outburst with patience. On the surface, if you just look at a few isolated cases, like scientists arguing about UFOs, well, I agree it doesn't mean anything. But suppose somebody had obtained a device by the end of the war which perhaps wasn't a very effective weapon. Perhaps it couldn't fly very effectively, couldn't carry guns or bombs, but it had other properties. For instance, it could emit radiation that caused paralysis and hallucinations as it flew over an area, so that witnesses exposed to it would think they saw the phantasms of their own imagination. Did somebody test that kind of device in Sweden in 1946 and in the States in 1947 and find it to be ineffective as a flying machine but very useful as a means of propaganda? Has such a group already understood what UFOs were, and are they confusing the issue by simulating UFO waves, or is the entire phenomenon under their control? You cannot mean that, Major. I got up and took from a shelf from his well-organized library the Book of the Damned by Charles Fort. Many of these typical tricks of what we now call UFOs have been described in the journals of bygone days collected by this man. Wait, said Murphy. Things are rarely so simple, my friend. I am only trying to caution you, so you will not spend your time chasing dreams. There is a UFO phenomenon, and there have been contactees claiming intimate knowledge of it since time immemorial, but there is also a capability to create artificially both the UFO sightings and the effects reported by contactees. Furthermore, there is a potentiality that some group has already understood the whole puzzle, solved the UFO problem. Yes, you need to face all the possibilities. You have to draw the consequences. Someone may have solved the problem. Perhaps there is an elegant solution to multidimensional travel. It is being applied. I am not a physicist. You should ask your a theoretician, your theoreticians, friends, what they think. I can only tell you that silent disc-shaped flying machines can be built. If they are equipped with the right devices, they can create astonishing effects and be reported as flying saucers. I wish I still had my files on the German experiments. Suppositions, I thought, assumptions. We're going to need more than that to explain the UFO problem. Major, I can't believe that some Nazi group had managed to survive secretly with this kind of technology and this power. Who says anything about the Nazis? I am suggesting that other groups have become involved. Germany was simply a little ahead of the other people. You have V2s in 1944, and you have the Atlas rocket. in the 1960s. You have Foo Fighters in 1943, and the Green Fireballs of New Mexico 9 years later. A lot of people got involved. Industrial concerns, laboratories engaged in psychotronic research. The Nazis' research on microwaves was child play compared to the sophistication of modern experiments. If someone is using this technology, we can assume they have also mastered pharmacology, the use of drugs to distort the memories of witnesses, the use of mind control to suggest stories, to plant fake observations. Don't you think people should try to get some information about that before believing in friendly space visitors? It's hard to believe that these techniques would already be applied on this kind of scale, I said. Don't you read the newspapers? Don't you follow publications of mind control? The military has been using this kind of technique for years. He pulled out a file of a series of New York Times clippings beginning in 1977. It described part of the U.S. project which spanned 35 years and involved hypnosis, narcolepsy, electronic brain stimulation, the behavioral effects of every physical vibration known to science, from ultrasound to microwaves. He showed me a book entitled Operation Mind Control, in which W.H. Boart describes his meeting with a young man who had just returned from a tour of duty with the Air Force. He suffered from amnesia. Like many UFO contactees, he remembered vaguely that he had had a good time, but couldn't describe in detail where he had been. After many therapy sessions, he began to recall part of his activities. He had served, it seemed, on a military committee in Vietnam. He had dreams in which he was standing at a long table on a beach with communist officers on one side and Americans on the other. Although the discussions were heated, nothing was written down. His assignment was to remember everything that was said. He had been trained for total recall. Then his entire memory of these assignments was erased like a magnetic cassette. Giving me time to observe this information, Major Murphy gestured towards the notes I had compiled on the UFO contactees and their sects. You have assembled case histories on rather interesting groups. Don't misunderstand me, he said. I am not suggesting that secret agents are going around the world giving these thousands of people individual suggestions to see UFOs. As we found out when we began developing the science of propaganda during the last war, you don't need to do all that. A few well-placed stories, a well-planned program publicizing sensational incidences will do marvels. The contactees are being manipulated. I think we should not look in outer space for the manipulators. Where would you look? Right here on Earth, said the Major, with the satisfied air of a mathematics professor. I don't know why I can't read. I know I can't read. I'm fucked up. This MS is just a nightmare. And if I didn't have the nightmare, my life's been a nightmare, to be honest with you. The mathematics professor who has succeeded in proving an especially vexing theorem. The best place to start looking for them is among some of the occult groups. Such organizations are an ideal place for a clever individual to exercise his influence because they are ignored by the intellectuals and by those who call themselves scientific investigators. They are afraid of looking silly if they join the Order of Melchizedek. What will the dean say when he finds out? We both laughed. I knew that Murphy was right on at least that point. The professional scientists were so insecure that they would thunder against any of their number who dared to read occult books and admit it, or who had got initiated into the Order of Melchizedek without clothes and in somebody's hot tub. Look at what you have already found. You have here many contactee stories that appear meaningless or foolish at first, continued Murphy. Yes, they contain explosive ideas, political control from a so-called higher level, social unification, resistance to nuclear energy, transcending traditional religions, eliminating the current financial system. Keep looking. You might find the most of the UFO groups, including the major civilian organizations, are influenced by some strange people. And then the pattern of conditioning you have discovered in your computer studies of UFO sightings may turn out to be aimed at long-term social changes. How could you prove that? Look for cases where direct contact seems to have taken place between such a group and someone who fits the profile of the manipulators, answered the Major, getting up from his armchair as I gathered my notes and walked toward the door. I looked for other unexplained effects which follow a similar modus operandi, things that have a strong symbolic content but don't seem to make sense, things that academic science refuses to study, but which make a substantial impact on the public. That's the level where the manipulators will do their work. If I am not mistaken, the UFOs are only one aspect of their activity, one tool in their arsenal. If these beings are human, they have to reveal themselves occasionally, even if they are very good at misdirecting our attention. So, do not go chasing every UFO that people report to you. You may find that the really important observation has taken place in your own backyard while you are away. We walked together to the quiet street lined with trees. Also remember, he said, as I was getting to my car, for God's sake, don't waste your time with the UFO groups. There's better things to do. I tried to catch him off guard just once. What will you say, Major, if I come back with evidence that some non-human beings are involved? Will you say that you were wrong and that the occult groups were right? I never said they were wrong, retorted the Major. I said they were infiltrated. Nice. Wish I could read better. It's quite a story, isn't it? It's turned out to be pretty good, isn't it? Adventures of a Grand Master. A few weeks after this discussion with the Major, I ran into the first indication that there might be some merit in his idea that the occult groups are controlled by skilled manipulators, and that it might even shed some light on the UFO phenomena. I found the indication in a book written by a Frenchman named Random Bernard. Bernard lives near Paris in Villanova St. George, I guess that's how you pronounce it. He heads up the European branch of the ancient and mystical Order of the Rosy Cross, one of the major organizations in the world that claims to preserve and teach the genuine esoteric tradition. True adepts of the Rosy Cross, it is said, are not of this earth. They are transcended. They have transcended the bonds of times and space. They need no human structure, no order, no Random Bernard. Did I say random? Raymond Bernard. They reach this exalted state, however, by a series of initiations that organizations such as Armorc, I guess it'd be pronounced, the capital AMORC, claim to preserve as a body of sacred knowledge. And everybody claims this, doesn't they? There's so many groups out there claiming it. Armorc, I guess I pronounce, teaches it throughout the world, mailing its educational material from its lavish headquarters in St. Juan, California. St. Juan is not St. Joe's. St. Joe. Is that how you pronounce it? I guess St. Joe's, California. Or San Jose, is it? San Jose, San Jose. What is it, St. Joe's? San Jose, California. I have my own conclusions about the nature of this process. I am not blind to the fact that many such organizations serve as cover for international espionage. From John Dee to Casanova to Aleister Crowley. He knew all this shit back then. Occultists have often doubled as spies, but that may not be the whole story. The fact is that as soon as we enter this domain, we find another hall of mirrors where opportunities for errors and deception are many. The confusion is blatant and deliberate. Its evolved purpose is to discourage superficial minds and curiosity seekers and most scientists. It also gives rationalists a good reason for rejecting the whole thing out of hand. The second purpose is to mislead most of those who still remain in the blind alleys by various forms of temptation. Making good, for instance, is a favorite sidetrack of adepts. I say making good, I said making gold, for instance, is a favorite sidetrack of the adepts. Only those who are not interested in the literal gold will be able to find their way deeper into the labyrinth. But what of the knowledge of the initiates, which AMORC claims to hold. Well, this knowledge is most ancient. The Amorc says it comes from, you guess it, Atlantis. It was preserved all this time by Egyptian priests and their descendants. Whether or not there ever was a continent or island of Atlantis is one thing. One thing is certain. Some techniques used by occult groups have indeed been preserved from the most ancient times. They include excellent operating knowledge in hypnosis, suggestion, and the law of forms, and they use their ritual and behavior control. The ancient art of hypnotic control has been transferred to the halls of academia, where it is used with caution and reluctance in the psychiatry department. But for all practical purposes, the awesome powers of the shaman have gone the way of good Godfrey and Aleister Crowley. There are notable exceptions. Hypnotic techniques taught to would-be adepts occasionally play a role in publicly visible events. Man, I'm seeing this on TikTok, by the way. Something I do. If I was smart enough and I would start all over again, I would do some serious research on that. I give myself a degree in psychiatry and what would it be? What is it anthropology or is it sociology? So I don't know. Whatever it would be, whatever the disciplines are, to research and study these manipulators. There's so many of them out there. It's amazing. Obviously, I am not one of them. I can barely read a frickin' sentence. And nobody has to worry about me being one of them, that's for sure. In 1968, a man named Sirhan killed Robert Kennedy in Los Angeles. Sirhan was a member of Amorc. He had used the order's technique for self-hypnosis while preparing his role in the tragedy. Raymond Bernard, too, has used the technique often, but for a different purpose, to obtain visions that would lead him to a higher level of being and would help him assume his role at the head of a thriving, active, wealthy international organization with members in all French-speaking countries, including large parts of Africa. Bernard, in turn, reports to the man who heads up the order worldwide, the Imperator. What is an imperator? Instead of the emperor, imperator? What the hell's an imperator?
Imperator.
Imperator. Commander. A title conferred under the Republic on a victorious general under the empire of Imperator. I never heard of an imperator before. Good to read from highly educated men, I guess. The manipulator struck in 1967. Raymond Bernard was contacted by a superior being who called himself Maha and who apparently had extraordinary eyes, which Bernard wrote reflected the entire universe. Bernard was convinced that Maha could communicate through his eyes alone. Their first meeting took place at the Carlton Hotel in Amsterdam. The effects of a powerful suggestion were immediately noticeable, for Bernard found himself standing before Maha and without being. I don't have to worry about is any of these imperators finding interested in me, or aware of having made an effort to get up. He could no longer perceive anything around him except Maha's eyes, extremely pale, which demanded that he abandon all control. What we have here is a statement of a man who has met in person one of the manipulators, an important statement even if the witness is a believer in the occult and highly trained practitioner of a tradition that is obviously affecting his perceptions. Maha was quick to point out that the hotel lobby was not a suitable place for their meeting. He walked to the street. An automobile picked them up and began driving along the later spleen. I guess it's lighter spleen, crossing the bridge, turning left, and moving away towards a suburb of Amsterdam. They stopped in front of a splendid residence building of light-colored bricks situated in a park full of flowers. Maha then made his purpose clear. He said he was a member of the High Council, also called A. In quotes. His statements about his role were couched in the same bizarre style used by Dr. Pittifer and other mystics we have heard. The reader already knows what I think of this style of discourse. It is used purposefully and not because it is suggestive, not because of its suggestive value. It lulls the mind of the hearer into a semi-hypnotic state until it is ready to receive the real message. The plant designed to grow and prosper in the audience's unconsciousness. Maha, just like Grace Pittifer and a few others of the strange characters I met in this quest, shows himself to be a master of the subliminal. He then began to discuss his political role and to paint an incredible picture of what I have called the control system. He pointed out that it is difficult to contain the errors of mankind. Why should the truth of one particular continent have precedence over the truth of another, he asked. The vigilance of the higher council is necessary to prevent human tragedy in a way that does not interfere with the freedom of mankind. After this general statement indicating that the so-called High Council works on a planetary scale, unconcerned by minor philosophical differences between capitalism and communism, the truth of one continent and that of another, Maha went on to deliver his main message, which Raymond Bernard would disseminate through his organization and through his books. He stated that mankind is now at the right level, and that the new cycle will see competition on a global scale. However, this new cycle is off to a bad start, said Maha. Mankind is approaching it with a mistaken concept of the value of money. In the coming cycle, the scales of value will be reversed, he added, leading to a new understanding of social good, the abolition of borders, and the death of nationalism. At this point in Maha's monologue, Bernard was still wondering why this meeting was taking place. In fact, he had heard much of this in earlier briefings about the role of the High Council. Maha seemed to have read his thoughts of puzzlement. The meeting, he said, concerned the specific role of propaganda and the public indoctrination that the groups such as Amorc, I don't know how to pronounce this, AMORC, I would pronounce it Amorc, can play. Raymond Bernard went to Vienna in June 1967. He met another man with a fine profile, dark eyes, and white eyebrows. The car this time was bearing the special plates of the diplomatic corps. They drove to an isolated house near a forest. It was surrounded with high walls, above which only the roof and the top floor could be seen from the road. There was no outward sign of activity, but as they knocked on the door, it opened onto a circular room with a floor of black and white marble triangles. Freemasonry, where 12 men were standing, dressed in white robes. There, Bernard witnessed a ritual with several striking peculiarities. First, he suddenly failed to hear the words of the celebrants, although he saw their lips moving. Then he heard a mounting vibration, not quite the sound used by Eastern meditators. He lost consciousness and was later puzzled by the whole experience. Reflecting upon it, Bernard came to the conclusion that he had been subjected to an examination. In fact, he has no proof that he had not been given post-hypnotic suggestions or reinforcements of earlier suggestions, whose existence may be indicated by the frequent perceptual phenomena he experienced. That's what I think all these secret societies is about. It's all about messing with the other side, these interdimensional beings, and mind control, hypnosis, the manipulating of our gullible and naive minds. Throughout the episode, all covered in his book, yet he asked no questions. The explanation is simple. He trusts these people as completely as the contactees trust their space brothers. Indeed, he says, I would give myself completely and without second thought to such beings. Their work is the supreme good, the summum bonum, In a later interview with the master of the house in Vienna, Bernard was given a key to the symbolic colors used in the ritual. He was told that red is the color of the cosmic masters, the regulators of human evolution. Once again, the words suggest a control system that combines physical knowledge with uncanny mastery of that emerging set of techniques the Soviets called psychotronics. After Bernard toured the entire house and was told its role and the function of the order, the master spoke a single word of 2 syllables. At least he can speak 2 syllables, because I can't. Upon hearing this key word, Bernard again lost consciousness. He assumed once more that he was reaching a level of cosmic ecstasy induced by the high meditative state of his hosts. To me, everything he describes again indicates hypnotic control. The master explains it himself by saying that every man can be linked to others by his key word, forming infinite series of chains. Is there really such an organization as the High Council? Probably not. The name may have been picked from for Bernard's purpose. Could the owner of the houses he describes be found? That indeed would be most interesting, but under what pretense could a serious investigation be mounted? There are laws against political agitation within a given country, but there is no law against people who think they can run the world by psychic means. What are they waiting for? The answer is straightforward. They wait for the coming of the kingdom of Grail. Fuck. When will this take place? When the UFOs land on Earth, or as the men told Bernard, when the knights of the Earth meet the celestial knights of macrocosm. I guess I do pronounce it. Macrocosm. Like cosm? Macrocosm. It's the knights of the macrocosm. That's where. Why couldn't I read that? In other words, when contact is openly established with the cosmic messengers, every religion has been promising us since Abraham, who got the idea from Melchizedek, allegedly. Did I even read that right? Oh, it's the same idea, interaction with God or the angels. In other words, when contact is openly established with the cosmic messengers, every religion has been promising us since Abraham, who got the idea from Melchizedek. I find it fascinating that there should be a secret group of men spending their time, money, keeping these ideas alive. Within the symbol of Melchizedek, all paths of belief become one, even those apparently most opposed, like Satanism and Christianity. In the last analysis, man is bearing every stream of knowledge within himself. The High Council rides higher still, beyond good and evil. Raymond Bernard was told that he must transmit what he had seen and make it public. He was instructed to write books about his encounters. This was a deliberate action on the part of his guides to get their symbols and their message out to the world. They carefully staged rituals. Their carefully staged rituals would be described in detail. Other books, movies, conversations would then pick up this message of ideas and carry them further. Among the notion they want us to believe is the assumption that they are the guardians of a most ancient tradition coming from the Atlanteans. Where did the Atlanteans get it? Maha stated the answer unequivocally by insisting that the knowledge came from another galaxy, was brought to Earth by the founders of Atlantis. The claim is made that the pure race of these Atlanteans has continued throughout the millennia. Maha will not reveal where they now live, not even to his dear disciple Bernard. He hinted that they are linked to reports of unidentified beings coming from elsewhere who pay for the goods they buy with pure gold. Spiritual blackmail. The being of the Kenegu, the man with long blonde hair and hypnotic eyes who could not be photographed by Jacques Bordes and paid with pure gold, the scientists who showed Helen the motor, the dwarfs who exhibited the trick map to Betty Hill and gave Valahon a fake gospel. Were they of the same origin as Maha? The U.S. Air Force has made many naive, misguided attempts to understand UFOs. It has tried patiently at first. Desperately sometimes to get rid of UFO saucers. To that end, it has used power from the scissors of its sensors and from the barrels of its guns. It was looking for evidence that the objects were a direct military threat to the United States. It never occurred that the USAF that the threat might be at a different level. The group of people who will first manage to harness the fear of, harness the fear of cosmic forces and the emotions of surrendering UFO contact to a political purpose will be able to exert incredible spiritual blackmail. Such weapons are less flexible, but also less detectable than tanks and aircraft. They represent a more lasting form of control over the lives of men. It takes a long time to bring their effects to complete fruition because secrecy is essential for them to work. The contactees and the occult believers have been used as puppets. The public in every country now recognizes the existence of UFOs and associates it with the idea of wise visitors from space. A majority of the American public has been convinced of the existence of such visitors. They have harnessed Hollywood. They have made sure the whole subject remains a matter of ridicule and disrepute among scientists. There is in the White House a man who has seen a UFO and is impressed by what he saw. There are small groups and sects of contactees all over the world using a vague and confusing jargon that protects the unspeakable reality and claiming that salvation from heaven is just around the corner. I don't think we should expect salvation from the sky. I do believe there is a very real UFO problem. I have also come to suspect that it is being manipulated for political ends, and the data suggests that the manipulators may be human beings with a plan for social control. Such plans have been made before and have succeeded. History shows that having a cosmic mythology as part of such a plan is not always necessary, but it certainly helps. The stratagem, part 3. Practically all the ruses and stratagems of war are variations and developments of a few simple tricks that have been practiced by men on man since man was first hunted by man. The elementary principle of all deception is to attract the enemy's attention to what you wish him to see, and to distract his attention from what you don't wish him to see. General Sir Archibald Wavell, a memorandum to British Chiefs of Staff, 1940. 9. A cow for NORAD. The steep hillside up to the electrical controlled high entrance gate to the huge tunnel into this whirlwind intelligence nerve center is covered with rock and bush. Surprisingly, a few cattle are also grazing here, and no doubt to lower any possible fire hazard. So right there, immediately overlooking thousands of military buildings, the protective covering of hundreds of planes and helicopters and 20,000 soldiers, and immediately in front of the electronic brain and senses that survive the entire North American continent, so that even a needle couldn't get in undetected, plus monitoring of all the space from here to the moon. Someone thought this would be a neat place to have a cattle mutilation. Frederick W. Smith, cattle mutilation. And the last 3 years, a new problem has added to the list of unsolved questions surrounding UFO phenomena. Much intense discussion has taken place among the believers and the skeptics alike about this problem. I am referring to the many reports of cattle mutilation that are reported throughout the western states, often at the same time in the same area as UFO sightings. Are the mutilations real? Are they caused by UFO occupants? I must admit that I cannot give a conclusive answer. I can summarize the facts, however, and show why they are relevant to the possible exploitation of UFO beliefs. Let me first remind the readers that the 3 positions people have taken about the mutilations are as follows. And it's interesting that you hear no cattle mutilations in India or the East, which tells me something, it suggests something at least, that the manipulators in India wouldn't dare offend the public to that extent. But they wouldn't have a problem here, would they? Where we don't treat cattle as sacred. Not in saying that we should, I'm saying we don't. In fact, I enjoy a good steak and hamburger, and it's one of the pleasures in life. So, and but you can just imagine if that was going on in India, with how fanatical people are there with the Hinduism, and if they found out that their sacred cattle were being mutilated, they would freak out. They'd probably tear down other government building within 100 miles of where it happened. The cattle have died naturally and were mutilated by predators or were killed by a few isolated sensation seekers. 2. There is an organization secretly conducting large-scale mutilation of cattle, either as part of some witchcraft cult or as part of the secret government testing program. I think that witchcraft cult thing is the key in what he just said in all this. I don't understand it, but I would not be surprised that is, magic. 3. The manipulations are caused by UFOs and their occupants. We must approach this new area with caution. The accumulation of data seems to prove that many of the reported mutilations are real. Many animals, small and large, ranging from rabbits to buffaloes, have been killed mysteriously and have had some organs removed. In studying these reports, I have disregarded all cases where predators could have been involved, and I have relied on the original police reports and on the statements given by state veterinarians and county coroners about the nature of the wounds inflicted on the animals. These documents disclose the fact that the mutilations are not of the sort that some UFO gang or witchcraft cult would be likely the cause. No, but you have to reassess that, what you just said there. It doesn't, you don't have to have people walking around in, hooded cloaks with swords and whatever, they're daggers, doing rituals that not necessarily have sorcery involved in all this. I know it sounds crazy, and I never would have believed in it until all the things that I've been seeing and documenting. But I think that if you understand how to interact with the elementals and certain entities that cross from the barriers of the under, middle, and upper worlds, you just might need to have certain kind of ways of appeasing. They used to have things called animal sacrifices. Remember that? That's what the whole damn Bible's about. And what are animals? Humans are animals too. So they had a lot of human sacrifices as well. And it seems to appease somebody because they keep doing it. And they've been doing it since time immemorial. But we won't go to that place yet. And sure, it's probably just speculation on my part, but who knows? These documents disclose the fact that the mutilations are not a sort of that some youthful gangs, that's the part you said, youthful gang or witchcraft cult would be likely to cause. They involve surgical techniques that demand both good anatomical knowledge and procedural skill. This restricts considerably the range of possible suspects. In the words of law enforcement officials, of a law enforcement official in Montana, diligent and intensive research by officers assisted by pathologists, veterinarians, and toxicologists, and others have failed to unravel the mystery. Secret societies, I believe, have something to do with the manipulating of the elementals. We are entering a new era where we must tread carefully. Some of the evidence may have been planted to mislead us into false conclusions. The connection of the UFOs appears especially tricky, and if proven, would still not answer all our questions. Someone could be simulating UFO events to turn the investigators' attention away from the real cause of the mutilation. Or it may be that the mutilations are in fact the next step in the unfolding of a process directly related to the UFOs. In the arsenal of mass manipulation, few weapons are as effective as terror. Among the devices of terrorists, few are as striking as the mutilation of people and animals. Here again, the connection with esoteric organizations is a familiar one. On May 2nd, 1918, in Munich, for example, right-wing newspapers accused the left of having murdered and mutilated hostages who were members of the cult, the Thule Society. Hostages' sexual organs were said to have been severed before the hostages were shot. The story was a fabrication, but it succeeded in convincing the farmers and the middle class that the executions had been the work of a Jewish conspiracy. This is another thing too, man. They just, oh man, oh they mess. Is it the Jesuits? Is it the Jews? Or probably it's both. At the top, they didn't care if you're a Jesuit, Jew, or Catholic, or what. If you're not part of their club, that's all that matters. Is in fact, are you part of their club or not? And if you're part of the club, you're going to do what you need to do in order to maintain the club, and you're going to blame everyone under the sun about it. And that's the problem. They created a situation where you're never going to figure out who's behind any of this. Or at least they want to convince us that we'll never be able to find who's behind all this madness. I'm not just talking about cattle mutilation and UFOs. I'm talking about the whole package of bullshit that we're under. So more than 200 leftists were executed by May 5th in reprisal. Throughout the course of history, actual or fake mutilations have been a tool of political terror for both the left and the right. Think about this, when we were wiping out and taking over the indigenous First Nation people in North America. And endless stories of people say, oh yeah, you're raping the women and scalping everybody. And it turned out the people who were doing most of the raping and the pillaging and the scalping were actually Europeans. And then, of course, what do you do if it's happening to you and you're seeing your whole village wiped out and you remain? You retaliate, right? And it's just never ending. And why does everyone have to be at war with everybody? What the fuck? Why can't I mean, I understand at the very top. I understand why they're at war with the rest of us. You know what I mean? Because they want to maintain their status and their privilege and control, and they don't want to be, working, doing hard labor like a lot of us have had to do. They don't want to be doing that. You know what I mean? They want to maintain status quo. But it just says something about their own nature. People suck. I mean, that's all I gotta say. So, is it so far-fetched that human beings wouldn't be doing the cattle mutilation? Fuck no. It wouldn't be. And maybe they're doing it to serve their masters. Apparently, I hear over and over again at the very top that they do worship spirits, demons, interterrestrials or extraterrestrial beings? I don't know. I'm not part of anybody's group. I'm just a fucking isolated wallflower at this point. I'm a nobody beyond nobodies. And they got me so friggin' censored, it's ridiculous. Man, you'd think they wouldn't have taken it. Just all they want to do is play music, do my art, and make love to pretty chicks. And no, I can't not have any of that. Then I became a dad, and I wanted to be a good dad to my son, and my son doesn't want anything to do with me. Because his mom's side of the family, I mean, they demonize the living fuck out of me. Now, maybe I might be, I might have a lot of issues. I'm still a human being that was worthy of somebody giving a shit. But guess not. And then they'll say, well, it's because you've a previous life, it's karma. There's no evidence of karma at all. And there's no evidence that in a previous life. Now, I wouldn't be surprised there is reincarnation, but I would tell you this much, they memory swipe us. We don't remember shit of any previous lives, so if that's the case. Throughout the course of history, actual or fake mutilations have been a tool of political terror. As such acts convey many symbols into the minds of those who read about them, evoking a feeling of helplessness and fear. The countryside is especially vulnerable, isolated as the ranch houses are under the night sky. If cattle are found inexplicably cut by the knife of an unknown criminal, people are likely to feel ancestral terrors. Threatening and heavy, his wings overshadow thee. Satan himself is hovering near. Such a mutilation of cattle has been systematically carried out by persons and forces unknown since the 1974 at least. The reaction of the local, state, and federal authorities was usually swift but ineffective. Many individuals and organizations have been suspected of having engineered the slaughter, but since no one has been arrested or convicted for it, many farmers now assume that the perpetrators were either creatures from outer space or secret agents on payroll of the government agencies themselves. The problem is well worth a detailed examination here, not only because it involves the same patterns as UFO landings, but because its social repercussions follow the same general principles. Incidences of high strangeness are reported by credible witnesses. Apparent evidence found at the site turns out to be spurious, worthless, and misleading. Authorities become involved but fail to provide an adequate explanation. The press amplifies the mystery. Hoaxers and curiosity seekers complicate. It's so true, my God. I gotta talk about that too. I got so much to write about in my book. I get so. I just don't know where to go. There's a lot of bad people out there. That's all I gotta say. And they think they're just doing it. They really think that the hoaxing and all that is just for fun. I guess people just don't really have anything better to do. Finally, academic researchers issue explanations that witnesses and knowledgeable investigators throw into the garbage, but which impress the scientific community enough to discourage it from probing any deeper into the real nature of the problem. The ultimate result is the spread of a feeling of anguish and unformulated expectations throughout the area where the evidence have taken place. Expectations of something dreadful that will come from the sky, something no one on earth understands, and something swift and pitiless that will reshape human life. The numbers of themselves are eloquent, and in an 18-month period, there's that 18666, before January 7th, 1977, there were 700 mutilations in 15 western states. More than 100 cases occurred in Colorado alone in 1975. There's a lot of military bases there too. Most cases have taken place under the same conditions as UFO landings. At night, in silence. Other characteristics have been: no cause of death could be determined. Blood was drained from the animals. Specific organs were cut away. No trace or tracks of the killer could be found, and no efforts had been made to hide the carcasses. In fact, as Mendocino Sheriff Investigator Baron Hanks said, after studying 7 mutilated cattle in Covelo, California, between November 1976 and January 1977, it was like someone wanted us to find them. I think so. The slaughter begins. First, a review of some older cases. 1. January 29, 1953. Conway, South Carolina. A farmer heard a commotion in his barn and observed an object at treetop level. It was about 7 yards long and 4 yards wide, light gray, lit up inside, and shaped like a half egg. The witness fired his gun at the object. Numerous cattle were found dead of unknown causes after the sighting. 2. November 14, 1954. Isola, Italy. A farmer named Amerigo Lorenzini took cover when a bright cigar-shaped craft landed near him. Out of it came 3 dwarfs dressed in metallic diving suits. What the fuck? Why would you be dressed in metallic diving suits? They spoke among themselves in an unknown language while looking at the rabbits in the cage. Lorenzini aimed his rifle at the intruders, but it failed to fire. He felt so weak he had to drop the gun. Lorenzi saw the dwarfs take away the rabbits, and the craft departed. September 18, 1962. Barcelos, Brazil. I did pronounce it right. Barcelos, Brazil. 3 men working in a rubber plantation saw a large dish-shaped object hover near the river. It emitted sparks and was silvery in color and very bright. It eventually rose straight up at a high speed. Cattle disappeared from the area. Fall 1969, near Kansas City, 2 women saw an unidentified object come close to the ground and heard the yells of an animal being slaughtered as the object took off again. like vampires. As far as my files extend, there are indications of peculiar effects on animals wherever UFOs are seen. Horses lifted up from the ground, dogs paralyzed along with the human masters. We have the claim that some of the animals have been taken away or left behind as mutilated carcasses rotting in the sun. A man named Anton Fitzgerald reported 2 strange experiences that took place 1 year apart in the mid-60s. The first one happened in Natal, Midlands, and Africa, as Fitzgerald and a farm manager named Jacques Marais, my shoulders, were walking down a hill on this property. One fine morning, they saw an eerie reddish glow on the farm runway about 200 yards from them. The flock of sheep in the runway paddock were all standing in two one-third circles on opposite sides of the glow, looking towards it. From our elevated position, wrote Anton Fitzgerald in the aviation magazine Wings Over Africa, the sheep reminded me of iron filings on a piece of paper around a magnet. The pinkish glow started rising vertically without a sound. Fitzgerald inspected the area and noticed that one of the old sheep was missing. He was reminded of the Zulu legend of the red sun that rises straight up into the sky after devouring some of the tribe's cattle. The Cherokee Indians have a similar legend of a sun that rises straight up. The second incident witnessed by Fitzgerald took place as he was flying over western Texas. His companion, another pilot named Jake Ruggel, thought the object was a weather balloon. Man, I saw this fucking thing this year in February. So, which was more intense in the center. In this case, 2 animals had been fascinated by the phenomena. White-faced Hereford steers on the ranch of a man named Ted Leslie had stood in a semicircle in the paddock. One of the older steers was missing. The case was reported to Project Blue Book, the first case to be investigated officially in the context of UFO reports was that of Snippy the horse in Colorado in September 1967. Nothing came of it because the horse had been left there too long before scientists arrived at the spot. There had been UFO reports in the specific area where the carcass was found. In 1974 and 75, cases begun coming in a real wave. In late July 1975, Ashlot Beach, north of Fort Shaw, Montana, a mutilated cow was found in the pasture and the teats cut off with a sharp instrument. The grass trampled down for 9 feet around the cattle. The farmer had seen a blinking red light at the spot on the previous night. It had moved down the road. A short time later, a young boy saw a red light going through a field, which was inaccessible to vehicles. No trace of the vehicle of a vehicle were found. 2 cows were missing and have never been found. In the words of Captain Wolverton, the officer in charge of investigating such reports in Cascade County, the records of the sheriff's office are filled with numerous reports of UFO sightings. In a number of cases, the person reporting the sighting was able to give officers a vivid description of the strange craft. These varied from saucer-shaped craft or something that looked like a giant pear to a large object that looked like a 2-story building with lights resembling windows. There are 2 UFO landings on a ranch near Simmons, Montana on December 8th and 9th, 1975. The rancher's wife and children saw the object, a large white light with a red light on top, came to the ground in the area where the carcasses of a calf, already dead from natural causes, but had been left on the grass about a half a mile from the house. When the object ascended, it seemed to roll on its side, flying away toward August west at low level. The next evening it returned, remained about 1 minute, and left to the east. The calf was found mutilated. The three officers went to the site and examined the carcass. They found that the udder area had been removed. The cut marks around the wound were consistent with those found in earlier cases that pathologists have verified were made with a very sharp instrument. Delusionary spirals and other surgical instruments. Delusionary spirals. Reprogrammer. So my shoulders are burning so bad. Oh my God. Many people still think that the cattle mutilations can be explained by natural causes. In a state the size of Montana or Texas, cattle die by the hundreds every month. It is not surprising to discover carcasses that have been eaten away by predators. James Stewart, an assistant professor of sociology from the University of South Dakota at Vermillion, suggested that belief in cattle mutilations was the result of the collective delusion, something we have already heard many times as explanation for UFOs. How can the ranchers be deluded when they report mutilated animals? The sociologist in question reports that 1, they may have caught in a delusionary spiral, and they hope to collect money under the vandalism clause of their insurance policy. 3, animals may have been killed by people, and 4, they may have been killed by wild dogs. And then it has this diagram of 3-9, drawing made of a UFO witness, by a UFO witness in Vaughn, Montana, an area where there have been many cattle mutilations. There were 2 objects with glowing domes, revolving blue and white lights. Lightning bolt was seen underneath them in intervals. Objects were observed at dusk for 5 minutes. Nice big old blob there. My feet are swollen up. I'm dying. feel like it at least. All these explanations are valid for a portion of the cases, but they are emphatically contradicted by much of the evidence gathered by the police. In Nebraska, Captain Vern Byler, Criminal Division of the State Patrol, cited a case that his agency had investigated in which he found evidence of deliberate mutilation that could not be attributed to predators. Similarly, in Texas, Captain W. Wilson of the Texas Rangers stated that several cases he has studied were classified as unexplainable, but they were only the tip of the iceberg. Threatening and heavy. I have before me a standard police report form. It comes from Texas. It is signed by Sheriff Richards of Cochran County, and is dated March 10, 1975 at 12:30 p.m. The complainant is a resident of the town of Whiteface. The offense listed in the upper right-hand corner of the report reads, cattle mutilation. The statement indicates that upon hearing the complaint, Sheriff Richards went to the scene and found the following. About 2 miles over in a field was a perfectly round circle. The heifer was lying in the middle of the circle with the head to the north. The bottom jaw was cut back and the tongue was gone. The sex organs were cut off and gone. The navel was cut out in a round circle and the meat inside was not touched. There was no blood on the ground nor on the cow. While he was checking this out, the rancher said, "If you think this is odd, look at the place a quarter mile west." Sheriff Richards found another circle where there with a dead steer. The circle was about the same size as the other one, but the wheat was about 4 inches tall, and it had been burnt clean. These circles were about 30 feet in diameter. The team from Reese Air Force Base went to the area and found no abnormal radioactivity. The only unusual circumstances that were related to the case were frequent recent reports of UFOs in the area. The people that have been reporting this all tell the same story. It is about as wide as a 2-lane highway around and looks the color of the sun when it's going down. I've seen that thing. I've seen it. Law enforcement agencies in the area tried, understandably, to prevent rumors from spreading and to issue reassuring reports. In Utah, a veterinarian of the staff of the Department of Agriculture, on the staff of the Department of Agriculture, was told he would be fired if he announced his conclusion that an animal had autopsied had died abnormally. The mutilation reports extended over Kansas, Nebraska, Iowa, South Dakota, Colorado, Oklahoma, Minnesota. During 1974, the following year, many cases occurred in Puerto Rico at the same time as UFO phenomena. According to engineer S.R. Lamarche, who investigated many of these reports, the first strange deaths took place in February 1975 By April 9, the Assistant Secretary of Agriculture, Mr. F.N. Rodriguez, stated that the problem was occupying his department full-time. The federal meat inspector, Mr. I. Fernandez, said that the cause of death was unknown. Domestic animals and poultry were killed, as well as cows, sheep, pigs, and apparently by stabbing with a very sharp instrument. A biophysicist at the University of Puerto Rico, Dr. Alejandro de la Sierra, said he investigated the case where an incision had been made, similar to what is done in experimental surgery. And one of the incidences in which the UFOs were related to the discovery of dead animals, a rooster was killed near the house of Mr. Orlando Francisci, who works at the hospital at Ponce. This took place on the night of April 18, 1975, after he had observed a dwarfish being that floated away from him. Feeling it was going to attack him, he tried to hit the strange creature with the shovel, but suffered temporary paralysis. When he came home in a distraught state, the police were called and an investigation was launched. A group of independent witnesses had seen the being and had thrown stones at it. The same night, the next day, two women observed a vivid orange light hanging stationary above their garage near Ponce, or depending on how you pronounce it. I would call it Pounce. After about 5 minutes, it rose silently and moved away behind the mountain, but around the whole area where the object had been, a glow remained visible. An interesting sequel in the light of the contact incidents related to the first part of this book. Let me see where I'm at. Let's see, do this over again here. Okay. So I'll blow this off now. Involves a series of messages this man heard inside his head. During the following days, they were warning mankind of disaster unless people started saying more prayers. Other countries experienced the phenomena. In 1975, there were incidences in Ontario. In 1976, in Quebec, Canada. In the spring of 1976, according to information received by a Texas research group, 2 horses were found in a snowbank near Wildwood, Alberta. The uterus and left eye had been removed from each one. The only tracks and marks resembled bird prints. The carcasses were allegedly flown to Winnipeg for analysis. The same group reports cases from Brazil, Bolivia, Sweden, Australia, and Scotland. In April 1977, similar cases were reported in France in the Vosges region. Now, the episode began with the slaughter of 34 sheep in a single night at Barriers, barriers, 8 sheep at Vaumecourt, if that's how you pronounce it. In 1 week, the total number of dead animals included 61 sheep and 1 deer. Hunters and soldiers were deployed in the area, including troops of the 43rd Regiment and Forest Rangers. In spite of their extensive research around the clock, unknown agents soon killed another 5 sheep in Rambervillers. I don't know if I pronounced that. Rambervillers. The local police attributed the deaths to a wolf and a hungry little bastard it must have been. A single night early in May 1977, it killed another 8 sheep in Jesserup. Some of the deaths took place in fields and pastures surrounded with barbed wire. In late September, 2 sheep were killed near Epino. They were the only survivors of the earlier slaughter of the same property belonging to Mrs. Claudia Riget. In France, as in the United States, some of the cases actually were the works of wolves. A wolf was killed in Lorentz, but that area is 500 kilometers south of Vosges episode. A man carrying a knife and a rifle was arrested in October 1977 near Epino, but this incident could hardly explain the earlier slaughter. In spite of the attempts to keep the stories out of the newspapers, the questions were escalated. If someone could with impunity fly close to the ground and land in isolated spots, if someone could kidnap animals, slaughter sheep and cows, and remain undetected, could anything be done to stop this madness? Who was responsible? And what purpose was served? As with many UFO encounters, the mutilations carried a message. In the United States, they seemed to tell military authorities what their radar and computers with their radars and computers see how helpless you are, see how obsolete your technology is. The calling card. A man named Frederick W. Smith, who lives in Colorado, has offered the only interpretation of the mystery that among everything I have read on the ship that makes it sense to me. He writes very simply, someone has been delivering a message to the American people, to the government, and to the intelligence community. The information amassed by Mr. Smith is coherent and quite impressive. Most of it comes from an area where he lives, right in Colorado. It leaves far behind the delusionary spirals and the social scientists and the soothing predator theory of the public relations boys. Governor Richard D. Lamb, I guess it's Lam, flew to Port Pueblo on Monday afternoon, September 4th, 1975, accompanied with John McIver, director of the Colorado Bureau of Investigation, to confer with the executive board of the Cattlemen's Association about the mutilations, which he called one of the greatest outrages in history in the western cattle industry. The governor of Colorado added, it is no longer possible to blame predators for the mutilations. That same week, what the local newspapers called the largest force of law enforcement manpower ever assembled in history in Colorado was deployed. It failed to identify a single subject. Reports were coming in daily. 60 officers from Nebraska, Wyoming, and Colorado met in Fort Morgan to try to coordinate their efforts. And then it has this newspaper article here. This scary little wolf thing here. A sample of French newspaper article describing unexplained deaths of over $40,000 worth of cattle in a few weeks, in spite of watches and searches conducted by farmers, police, and French troops. The killings continued several months later. Attempts explanations range. I don't know if that attempts something. Explanations range from hungry wolves to vengeful neighbors, and had to be rejected on the basis of evidence. But there was no visible progress. However, Colorado Bureau of Special Investigation Special Investigator Carl Whiteside said that the removal of sex organs and other bodily parts was definitely not made by predators. The phenomena had certain characteristics. The animals died with no evidence of struggle. There were no tracks or bloods near the carcasses, although the circular depressions and pod-like marks were sometimes reported. Some carcasses seem to have been airlifted, then dropped in areas which maximize the chances of discovery. And intense blinding lights from the sky were often associated with the events. In a news release dated September 18, 1975, the senior senator from Colorado, Floyd K. Haskell, disclosed that he had discussed the matter with the FBI Director Clarence Kelly and his chief assistant. However, the FBI concluded it had no jurisdiction to enter the case because there was no evidence of interstate movement. The most remarkable feature of the mutilations was their beautiful precision. Many ranchers echoed the statement of Adams County, Idaho Sheriff Jim Heilman. "I've been around livestock all my life, and I've never seen anything like this." A Garfield County officer named Hart disclosed that on September 13th, a Hereford cow was discovered just across the county line in Mesa County. Missing were the sex organs, the rectum, and ear. Another case, a steer was found in open country, cut open at the ribs with the heart excised. In Montana, a Wolverton unit investigated a dead bull calf North Cascade. Its right hind leg had been removed, and a circular cut that went completely through the leg bone below the hip socket and extended towards the midsection, exposing the stomach area. All sex organs had been removed. There was no footprint and other evidence around the carcass. Also in Montana, a cow was found in an undisturbed plowed field. Its loose furrows intact 3/4 of a mile from the fence line. 2 teats and the rectal area have been removed with a sharp instrument and an incision underneath the front leg. Went all the way to the heart. The absence of tracks in Montana was remarkable because the ground at the mutilation site was frequently soft, muddy, and covered with snow. It is quite true that some predators, such as coyotes, have razor-sharp jaws and can produce circular bites around parts of they eat. A trained investigator, however, can tell the difference between such natural incidences and deliberate mutilation. Some of the carcasses showed evidence that a standard autopsy procedure, the Rokitansky technique, had been used. It consists on the removal of the viscera as the integral unit. Coyotes and delusionary spirals do not use the Rokitansky technique. In Colorado, there was a concentration of mutilation incidences in Elbert County, very near some of the world's most sophisticated military installations. These included at Air Force Base, Fort Carson Army Base, Peterson Airfield, Lowry Air Force Bombing Range, the U.S. Air Force Academy, the Buckley Air National Guard, and the Naval Air Station. The Rocky Mountain Arsenal, where nerve gas is manufactured and stored. The Rocky Flats, where H-bomb triggers are assembled. Noting the impressive display of advanced technology in the vicinity, Frederick Smith writes, the capstone of all this, ultimately all the U.S. military muscle, is at Air Force Base in Cheyenne Mountain, the headquarters of NORAD, North American Air Defense Command, and the Canadian Air Defense Command, carved into the solid heart of Cheyenne Mountain, and is NORAD's Combat Operations Center. 45,000 cubic yards of granite had to be blasted out to accommodate its solid steel buildings, some of them 3 stories high, all freestanding and mounted on the biggest coil spring ever made. The purpose of this fortress inside a mountain is to detect and analyze everything entering or crossing the U.S. airspace. The celebrated Cheyenne Mountain Zoo is situated on the north of the mountain. A 1,500-pound female bull was mutilated there on Tuesday, October 21st, 1975. An udder, an ear, and 4 square feet of hide had been removed. The vagina had been cut out. Zoo director Dan Davis stated, "There is no doubt the animal was mutilated with some sort of sharp instrument handled by man." Additional details were given by El Paso County Coroner Director Raul W. Urick. The cutting was done neatly, clearly, and obviously with very sharp cutting instruments. The dissection was the type that would eliminate any type of predator. Noting that the hide had been removed without puncturing the tissue underneath. He added, "It was better than I could do if I were trying. It was really an expert job." It was an expert job, but even more remarkable was an incident that had occurred July 6, 1975, next to NORAD entrance gate, near the unmarked NORAD road, which is not shown on the road maps. The entire area is a military reservation, and every few feet there are signs warning the violators will be prosecuted to the full extent of the law. The mutilation was standard. It was a cow due to calve in 2 months. Sergeant Robert Stone, the sheriff's office, ruled out the possibility that the sex organs were removed by a coyote. There are only indications supporting Mr. Smith's thesis that the mutilator's purpose is to send a message to the military and the intelligence communities. Many of the carcasses appear to have been dropped from the air. In one report, a large bull was found with all 4 legs broken. Other animals were found outside an intact fence. 2 cows mutilated in Park County were found in a pasture with a padlock gate, not in the pasture where the owner had left them. Sheriff Norman Howie said they couldn't possibly have been where they were found unless they had been dropped from the air. The carcasses showed evidence of internal pressure from the fall. Furthermore, and then he's got this sample of mutilation reports from the files of law enforcement agencies throughout the United States shows how widespread the phenomenon is. Mutilated animals were discovered in ponds, straddling ditches, wedged between large rocks, or lying bloodless next to large trees. Of course, there's trees again, places inaccessible even by helicopters. Sometimes the mutilations are clearly signed. Sheriff George Yarnell of Elbert County is quoted by F. Smith as saying that his most memorable case was one in which the udder was neatly cleaned out, leaving only skin, which was then tightly packed with several gallons of sand. In other cases, organs were cut out and left on top of the carcass. Perfect squares and circles were taken from the hide. In one incident, a scalpel had been left behind. It was an ordinary article of the military surplus. The stage was set for new attempts to explain the facts. The delusionary spiral theory clearly did not hold up, and something better had to be found. As each new hypothesis became more complex and more incredible, the specter began to rise. It gave the whole idea of contact with friendly space brothers another deadly blow. It froze the blood of believers and gave the skeptics some interesting new items to think about. But more than anything else, it challenged the law enforcement community. For a long time, UFO believers have wondered why so little recognition has been given to the problem by high government levels. They speculated that our leaders thought the public was not ready to learn the truth, which in their eyes consisted in the fact that an alien space invasion was taking place. I find it difficult to believe in that kind of cover-up. It seems to me that the intelligence community has only 2 good reasons to hide the truth about such a phenomena. Either it is secretly causing it for their own purposes and doesn't want the phenomena examined too closely, as in the case of its own deception operations, or it simply doesn't know the answers. Since the first rule of any secret agency is to always appear to know everything, this so-called UFO censorship may be more of a bluff than a cover-up. This suggests a particular meaning for the message. Dropping a mutilated cow at the main entrance NORAD may be a clear indication that someone is now calling that bluff. And it's a good place to stop. I'm in super pain. Super amount of pain. It's very distressing.
You're going to try, go all the way. Otherwise, don't even start. If you're going to try, go all the way. This could mean losing girlfriends, wives, relatives, jobs, and maybe your mind.
Seasons don't change.